How high will silver prices go in 2022? And what's the primary driving factors for silver, for gold, and for mining stocks in 2022? And here to talk about that is my good friend, Shawn Kun. He is the CEO of Dolly Barton Silver. And Shawn was one of my favorite people to talk to when we spoke last, is because Shawn's excitement just about life in general, all around inspiring, motivating guy. So I'm excited to catch up with you, Shawn. So that's Dolly Barton Silver. You can check them out, their website in the description right there down below. Make sure you hit the like button on this video, subscribe, bell notification, and give us your silver price predictions for 2022. Where will the price of silver go in 2022? Let us know what you think in the comments right there down below. And it's good to see you, Shawn.
Good to see you, Jake. Jake, I wanted to start off by asking you, what do you think of this shirt?
What do I think of it? I think it's a good shirt. I think it matches the grays tones of the mountains and the gray tones of the rocks. You look like you fit in perfect with your background.
So I got this shirt for Christmas, and I don't particularly like it, but I'm wearing it because my wife gave it to me, number one. Number two, I'm actually going to rip the price tag off of it right now. And I want to show this to you because my wife left this on. But this is a $280 shirt that she paid $29 for. Okay, so it was 89% off. So it's $29. And so what I'm thinking of in terms of when you ask that question about silver, if you take the 1980 high of $50 and you add, let's just use 2% compound interest, I would say silver today is 89% off, just like this shirt. So I just wanted to start with that.
I love it. All right. So in addition to silver being, as you stated, well below the highs of 50, what would you believe, other than stating, well, hey, it's way below its all-time highs? What do you believe are the driving themes for higher silver prices in 2022?
Well, if I go back a year, and if you would have told me that the inflation number that the Fed would have quoted was going to be 7% for 2021, like the stated number, not what's really going on in the real world, and you would have told me that silver would have been down 15% on the year, I wouldn't have believed you. So before I put a price target on what's going to happen next year, I just say, look, silver, there's a lot of demand for silver. There's the hybrid portion of silver where it's a monetary metal, but you've got this huge industrial demand for it. So I would think that, silver is going to have a tremendous year, but I also know from history, gold has to lead. Gold has to lead silver. And when gold breaks out, silver will outperform. So I believe gold is going to break out in 2022. And I think silver it'll move, it'll snap, and it'll be like gold on steroids.
So my next question was, why should we care about silver after a lackluster year in 2021? But since you brought gold into the conversation, I'll reframe that and say, why should you and I care about gold and silver, or if you want to put gold specifically, after a lackluster year in 2021?
Well, Jake, I think what you have to do is you can't look at just one year. So you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, what did silver do in 2020? And it was up 44%. So I look at last year as a consolidation year. It's a year of higher lows. And so really it was a setup year. And whether silver makes its big move in the first half of the year, the second half of the year, it's not relevant. The key is, if you look back and you look at what the price action was in 2018 or 2013, silver looks really strong from a long-term perspective, as does gold. And I'm a firm believer that when we see gold break out and go to new highs, which it has the potential to do in 2022, silver will drastically outperform. And I think it'll be a $40, $50 an ounce. But for me, it doesn't have to happen in 2022. If it comes in Q1 of 2023, that's good. That's good. The big question is, what are mining stocks going to do if we start seeing the silver price move up, not in pennies, but in dollars?
Now, in order to have that type of move, not in pennies but in dollars, as you're stating, is a higher move in gold. What do you think are the macro themes that will cause, or the micro themes that will cause gold to move higher?
Well, I'm a big believer that if you look at the inflation that we're seeing, if you look at the all the money printing, if you look at all the risks that are out there in the system, I think gold got ahead of all these risks back in 2019. Well, when Basel III was introduced, or the idea of it being introduced in the spring of 2019, that's when the gold price started moving. I think gold got ahead of all these things. So gold broke out of $1,300 back in 2019. It went to $2,100 an ounce. All the drivers that drove the precious metals market, they're here. They're more meaningful. We've had all this money printing. Where's it going? Is it effective? Has it been productive? You look at some of the geopolitical risks, whether it's in the South China Sea or in Ukraine. We're in a very, very vulnerable environment right now. We've got supply chain issues. So for me, whether you're in the deflationary camp or you're in the inflationary camp, or you believe we're going to have stagflation, gold is a safe place to hang out when you've got these record high asset prices. You've got all this uncertainty. Gold does well in every environment.
Yeah, gold and silver really moved big in 2020 off of fear. And there was that deflationary situation. There was incredible fear. And then the response was a lot of liquidity pumped into the system. Gold and silver began moving. And a lot of people like us were saying, hey, we print this much money, it's not going to be a good thing. And everyone said, nah, because everyone was getting free money. The stock market was going up and up and up and up and up. People were putting money into the markets. People were getting insane money for staying home. There was just a lot to go around. And now we've kind of caught up to this. And one of the places, as we're seeing cash continue to erode and our purchasing power continue to erode by inflation, you said 7%. I mean, look, we all know it's way higher than that. I'm trying to get a new car. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I can't even find a car. Honestly, I've called like every dealership. It's like used cars with like 25,000 miles that were last year's models. They're selling like more expensive than they used to sell the new ones. And so we're in this precarious situation, which leads me to kind of, as you and I have talked about before, and I've learned a lot from Rick Rule, is just trying to control what I can control. And basically for me, I have a financial number for my net worth, for my financial freedom, that I think is imperative in these unstable times. And I believe one of the components to help get me there is mining stocks. And silver stocks is one that I love because of the incredible leverage and movement when they do move. So give us your story of what brought you to silver stocks.
Sure, but before I do that, because you said a lot of things there that made me think, and I just think, look, I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. We don't know at what time this is all going to play out. But if we come at this in a reasonable approach, where we say, look, we want a basket of items, we want a basket of goods to protect us, right? Whether that's whether that's real estate, whether that's some cash, whether that's some gold and silver, and I really look at gold and silver as my cash component, because they are money. But what brought me to silver stocks personally? I got involved in the mining business 18 years ago. I got behind a gold project that was being built out in central Canada. The company had a lot of success. We made a big discovery. We took a mine into production. We raised about $500 million along the way to advance this asset. And I worked really hard over a 7-year period of my life. I call that sort of my blood, sweat, and tears period, in terms of grinding it out. And all that work, if I look at the monetary reward of all that sacrifice over 7 years, and all that work and all that luck that was also involved in making the discovery and being in the best mine finance market of the last 100 years. And all the stars had to line up. And Jake, I made as much money passively investing in a silver stock as I did through that gold enterprise. And so, I studied cycles, I've studied history. I was very deliberate to get more exposure to silver this go round, and we're setting up for a big precious metals market. We're in the middle of it right now. Whether you think this is a 3-stage market and we're just coming into wave 2 here, depending on how you define it. If you look at the last 21 years, precious metal prices have been rising significantly. If you go back to the lows 21 years ago, these markets are up tremendously. And we're setting up for a big, epic final move here. And I wanted maximum exposure to silver because I think silver could move up, it could move up tenfold from here. And so I was very deliberate because these silver equities, if silver is going to move up 10 times, some of these equities are going to move up 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about. And I saw obviously just a brief glimpse of that in 2022 from the bottom of 2022, where you even had, big stocks like Fortuna Silver was maybe like $2 or $3, and Hecla was like $1.50 for like only a couple days, and those things really moved. First Majestic was, I don't know what they were like $4 or $5, like they were, everything was, and then you see this incredible movement, right? And so Dolly Barton is one of the players in that silver space, and you were telling me you had some exciting news. So, what's been going on in the Dolly Barton world?
Yeah, so it's been really exciting. So I took over Dolly Barton it's going to be 2 years this coming February. So it was February 2020 that I took over the company. And just to put this into context, when I took it over, Jake, it was a $20 million company. So the market cap was $20 million. There was $3 million in cash, and there was 44 million ounces of silver in the ground. And my first year, I raised $27 million just in the first couple of months. And that's a big feat for a company that started the year with a $20 million valuation. And I didn't do the raise at a $20 million valuation. I did most of the raise at closer to a $100 million valuation, so it wasn't diluted for the shareholders. So I cashed up the company, and we started exploring, we started drilling, we started making discoveries. But my thinking was, look, I really want to use this pullback in precious metals in 2021, where you've had the price of gold down 8%, you've had the price of silver down 13.5%, you've had equities, some of these equities are down like 60% this year alone, right? So, last year when the market ran up, I raised money accretively at higher prices. This year when the market pulled back, I went out and I bought a tremendous mineral endowment just down the street from where we are. So about 5.5 kilometers from where our 44 million ounces are, we just added more silver and gold. So if we looked at it through a silver lens, we picked up about 94 million ounces of silver. So we're up to 137 million ounces of silver equivalent, and it's about 50% silver, 50% gold. So we've just added to inventory. So it's a proposed deal. Our shareholders are going to vote on this transaction in February. I think we've got overwhelming support. Eric Sprott has signed up a support and lockup agreement. So Eric's on side. I've talked to other large shareholders. They're on side. So I've got a lot of confidence going into the vote, but I do have to, just put out the caveat that this is a proposed acquisition until we finalize it. But it totally transforms Dolly Barton. It makes it one of the premier precious metals companies in the Golden Triangle. And Jake, the Golden Triangle in the last 3 years, there's been $4.8 billion worth of mergers and acquisitions. And that's really why I'm doing all this. You asked me why I'm in silver. Well, I'm in silver because I think it's undervalued. The reason I'm in the mining business, particularly exploration, is the majors. They're so afraid of making a bad M&A decision that they've spent no money in research and development, or what we call exploration and evaluation in the mining business. So they haven't invested in replenishing inventory, in replenishing new ounces. And I think what will happen is when we start to see the price of gold and silver continue to rise, it's a direct correlation between rising gold and silver prices and rising M&A activity. And what I'm trying to do for Dolly is I'd like to position us with as much silver as we can get to. I think that the property and the area has the potential for 300 million ounces of silver. We're after this acquisition, we're almost halfway there. And again, when I started, we were at 44 million ounces only 2 years ago. So we're getting there. We're getting there quickly. It's been good for the shareholders. The market likes the deal. And as you can see in my voice, I'm quite passionate and excited about the opportunity. But what I'm really excited about is the next phase of the market. It's about finding more ounces around what we've acquired, and it's about ultimately selling this to a larger entity at maximum valuation for our shareholders.
Yeah, if I was a mining executive, I would definitely be considering a similar philosophy to the one you suggested, because it's one thing to hear it from an explorer or developing CEO, but to also hear it directly from many of these big companies that we are having more shortages than people realize. We're facing some structural shortages down the way. I've had Peter Garofalo on a handful of times, and involved in Gold Corp and many large entities, and he said it every time. He says, look, it's a lot worse than people realize. And so as a mining executive, that sounds like an important problem to solve that can benefit the company and shareholders tremendously financially, but it's a micro within a larger cycle. And you touched on the word cycles. You said, your student and passion of cycles in history. And, you alluded to a precious metals cycle. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that place and time that we find ourselves in this cycle. What is this cycle? What do you think this cycle looks like? And what is the significance of it for all of us?
And Jake, you're going to hate having me on because you asked me a question and then I kind of go in a different direction, but I'm going to come back to it because you say so many interesting things that makes me think. And I just want to say one thing about Mr. Garofalo. You mentioned him being on multiple times. He's somebody who's, had top C-suite positions with Agnico Eagle, with Gold Corp, Hudbay, and I've watched his career. And I've actually got the pleasure to sit. We're both involved in a company in Ontario called Goldshore. He's an advisor. I'm a director, 4 million ounces in Ontario. But speaking of Mr. Garofalo, if you look at where he's focused, it's been in safe jurisdictions. And this goes back to what I'm trying to do here. You could have the greatest mining project on the planet, but if you don't have social license, or if you're in a country that might nationalize that asset, and again, everything that I'm trying to focus on, like Mr. Garofalo, it's in safe jurisdictions where the mining companies want to be. But in terms of where we are at in the cycle, there is a investment advisor at Raymond James, Bob Thompson, who has coined this idea of the mining clock. And so where Bob says, and Bob runs Eric Sprott's his foundation's money for the Sprott Foundation. He's someone who's very trusted by mining executives. He's trusted by me. And where Bob says we're at for precious metals on this mining clock that starts at 1 o'clock in the early innings and goes and it ends at 12 o'clock. He thinks we're at 7 o'clock in the mining clock for precious metals, and probably closer to 5 o'clock for base metals, things like copper. So for gold and silver, he thinks we're at 7 o'clock. So we're through halfway. And the reason this is so important is for your investors, you don't want to get round tripped, right? So you don't want to be there at 12 o'clock and more importantly at 1 o'clock when the party's over. And Eric Sprott talks about this as well. He talks about wanting to get to the party at say 9 o'clock, not wanting to be there at 2 a.m. when the lights come on. You want to be gone. You want to know where the exits are, and you want to be out the door. So, I agree with Bob. I think we're probably at 7 o'clock. Things are starting to get interesting now. If you look at markets and forget mining, if you look at any market, the mania phase where the greatest gains occur happen at the very, very end. The doubling, the tripling, the quadrupling. If we go back to the 70s, early 80s, and you look at the gold price went from 400 to 800 in 6 weeks. That doubling occurred in a very short period of time. So you could argue that the gold market from 1971 at $35, I think it went to 887.50 in 1980. So it was a 9-year bull market. Call it a 10-year bull market from 35 to 887. But the last doubling occurred in 6 weeks of that decade. So, I think that for investors, staircase this up, right? So, take a big position, take an overweight position. And when we get to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, start giving up some of your portfolio back to the new investors that want exposure to the space. And, for some people, look, they buy gold, like particularly physical gold or silver, not to ever sell it, just as a store of value and of wealth. But what I'm referring to here is the more speculative mining projects that have big resources in the ground that are in unstable jurisdictions where they may not get produced, but may go up 10, 30, 40, 50 times in value.
Do you know my friend Steve Penny? He's the silver. He runs Silver Chartist. Do you know who he is?
No, I don't. Sorry.
He runs a newsletter called Silver Chartist. He's on my channel a lot, and he's become one of my good friends. And he's got an awesome, successful newsletter. He's been on the show probably more than anybody since I started it. And what I really like about him is, so he's Silver Chartist, obviously his number one passion silver, but his newsletter covers gold and silver and all uranium, all these things. Real bright guy. He's got an awesome team and they've got a great thing going. But the reason he's so valuable, I think, to the market is because he actually rode all the way up to $50 and didn't sell anything.
Yeah.
The first time he told, it's such a sad story. Some commenters on YouTube got mad at me because they were like, why are you laughing at him? Because it's like hilarious. And he thinks it's funny too, because now he's learned so much and he's like so prepared for this moment in history. And he's also able to help a lot of people because, he went through the good times and bad times. And it's also what makes him such a good teacher. But I was reminded of that the first time he told me. I remember we were doing an interview and I just asked him a question off the cuff, and somehow it led to him saying, "Yeah, no, I'm up huge, it's up $50." And the next thing I know, in 2 weeks, it's like back to $8 or something. And so I think that's an important lesson, right? Is to make sure we're jumping off the ship, right?
Absolutely. And now that you've described that story, I do remember listening to him on your channel at least one time. And yeah, no, but if you can learn from those experiences, and that's what, I look at people like Rick Rule or Eric Sprott, who've, they've gone through so many of these, and there's a reason that they're successful as they are. They've learned from the big mistakes they've made over the time.
So let's talk about some of that psychology. I think it would be helpful for, obviously there's a lot of people passionate about silver stocks. Let's say someone buys Dolly Barton silver and a handful of these other explorers, and that's their play. They believe silver, has a lot of room to move. Can we talk a little bit about some of the psychology behind being successful when you mention Eric or you mention being able to, know when to exit? What are some other important psychological components, success components to being a successful silver stock investor?
Well, I think you really need to know yourself. You need to know your own personality. It makes no sense if this stuff's going to keep you up at night and you're going to put so much of your wealth into it that it makes you uncomfortable. Don't do it, right? So you need to really understand yourself, and it's so particular for the individual, right? Like, and you can't just follow Eric Sprott, because Eric's at a point where he can afford to speculate. When you're worth, when you're worth more than $10 billion, in order to move the needle, it's different than it is for you and me, Jake, right? So, when Eric comes at these things, let's take one of his investments, Discovery Silver. He's looking at it through the lens of going, okay, if silver goes to $50, what are the billion ounces that I'm getting exposure to at Discovery going to be worth? And he's willing to ride that all the way to zero for that payday. So I think you need to know for yourself, what am I trying to get out of this? How old am I? What other assets do I own? I just advised a friend who just like lives literally, I could throw a rock and hit his house. He just lives down the street. And he was asking me yesterday, I think a lot of people take this time of year to look at their life, whether it's health or whether it's family or whether it's investing, and try to come up with a plan for 2022. So I had this friend, he reached out to me and he goes, Shawn, can you advise me on some speculative investments? And I said, listen, go buy some Dolly Barton. Canadian markets were closed for a couple of days. I said, go buy some Dolly Barton. And he goes, well, what should I do with it? Right. And the reason I feel confident with advising a friend to buy Dolly right now, especially a guy that just lives down the street, right? Is because look, we've got this deposit that's in a safe place, and there's value here. Now, is Dolly Barton going to go up 100 times? Probably not, right? Because if we close this transaction, we're a $150 million company. So for us to go up 100 times, something pretty magical needs to occur. But there's other companies that are trading.
Well, if they keep printing money like this, everything.
Well, it's possible. It's possible. So I think it's a very complicated question that you asked for because there's so many factors that go into the way you have to look at these mining stocks, especially if you're just doing this recreationally. Like, you got to think, like, guys like me or you, we can afford to put in the hours, right? Like, I can afford to spend 80 hours a week getting to know management teams, getting to know scientists, walking me through metallurgical issues and all these different factors that go into what is going to make one company successful and the other not. If you don't have that luxury, the best thing you can do is go buy an ETF, go buy the GDXJ, or go buy GDX, or just get some passive exposure where sure, you're not going to perform as well as if you're in there individually stock picking, but you're going to get the exposure, and the move's going to be so big. So, like, what I tell my brother-in-law or family or people that I care about and I love is, I say, look, start with the physical. You got to start there because that's real. There's no counterparty risk, and that's there's nothing like it. So once you've got the physical, then you can go into some of the large producers. There's some great companies out there. The gold companies have never been more profitable. Some of these companies are making $1,000 on every ounce they produce, right? So go buy a Newmont, get a dividend. It's going to do tremendously well. Go buy Franco-Nevada. Go buy these royalty companies that have been around forever. They're lean. So once you got the physical, then you get the big producer that's paying a dividend. You get your royalty company. But if you want to speculate, or if you find yourself looking to take on more risk, then you can go down. And I think one of the big opportunities right now is in the developing companies, because if you look at 2020, the stocks that I saw that moved were the big producers and some of the explorers. They made some really big moves. Like a company like Dolly Barton was up 10 times from low to high in 2020. We went from 16 cents a share to $1.17. So it was up about 800% from low to high. But some of these developers, some of these companies that have an asset that's just about to go into production or on the cusp of that, they have underperformed. And so I really think that focus on companies that have resources in the ground, that have a mineral inventory, that are in safe jurisdictions. If you don't believe in higher prices, stick with companies that have high grades. If you believe in higher prices, go for those lower grade marginal deposits that don't work at these metal prices, but they'll be whether you're a high cost producer or you've got a lower grade deposit, those are going to be some of the best movers if we get price movement.
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff there. The psychology, I think has been a big one for me. I've been really lucky to be able to do all of these interviews and things like that because I've learned a lot from all of these interviews. And, you said a couple really important things. You said, know who you are, which sounds unimportant or cliche until you go through a commodities dip where a normal stock, on the S&P dips 5%, these dip 20. So you understand you got to know yourself. I thought that was really interesting what you said about Eric is he's making his decisions by calculating hypothetically what things will be worth at a $50 valuation. He knows who he is. He knows why he's doing it. He has a clear why behind why he's doing it. And it's money, that as you stated, that he can afford to lose. It's money you can assume is gone for 2 to 5 years or whatever basis you decide as part of your strategy of your own psychology when you find out who you are, what your goals are, why you're doing it. Does that sound about right? Because I thought that was really, powerful.
Yeah, no, that sounds right on. And you got to think like for Eric too, like picture yourself in a position where you bought one of these companies and you made $1 billion on one investment. And that's what happened to Eric with Kirkland Lake. So, your approach is going to be different. So I think that it's such a personal thing. And then the other thing is like what I was doing this morning, Jake, before this interview. This is December 29th. This is the last day of tax law selling in Canada. So I was out there buying my best, the best names. What I've come to realize is when I buy at the end of December, and sometimes it's the middle of December, depending on the year, different, but I'm usually up 20, 30% in a week in the junior mining sector. Like that's how explosive these moves can be. So, that's the other part of it is you're learning just, the time you spend in the business, you learn these things, the more of these interviews you can watch, but it looks like you got an idea here, Jake. So I'm gonna let you talk.
Oh no, I was just laughing because I was thinking, I watched that happen. You talked about tax loss and this and that, and I recall, everything, no matter what it was, uranium, and then as soon as it hit the new year, it's like everything moved quick and hard for 60 days, basically, and so that's an interesting point to make, right?
The other point I want to make is, you asked me like, what are some of the tips or, is follow people that have been successful. So I know Vizsla Silver is one of the sponsors of your channel or the sponsor. And I think of, their chairman, Craig Perry. And I think about, Craig's success at NextGen, ISO, Skeena, like, it's not an accident. Once you start understanding the business, larger companies will sell you projects or bankers will get behind you. Like the percentage of your success goes up in terms of, you become, John Robbins is another example where, it's just recent takeover of Great Bear. Like there are people in the industry, Ross Beatty, Lucas Lundin, there's a list of these serial success cases, and follow these management teams that have delivered wins to their shareholders, because there's a higher degree of chance that they are able to do it again because they have access to the best people, the best shareholders, the best projects.
Yeah, I think that I probably discounted that more as I was until I started doing more and more of these interviews and everyone started saying the same thing. And at first, that's another one that's like, go with the people, go with the team. It sounds almost a little cliche, but it's been another really powerful one. And you mentioned Craig. I love Craig because I don't think the market doesn't really, the top level people like know who he is, but not tons of people that just listen to shows like this know who Craig is because he's been so successful kind of behind the scenes, and he hasn't done much media. And he's someone I've really loved to get to know, and trying to have him on the show more and more because he's got so much value. But let's wrap up with this, right? So, you've got a track record of success. You saw an opportunity in silver. You went to Dolly Barton Silver. You've had some fantastic success. You started at 20 million market cap, 3 million in the bank. You've grown things tremendously. For those that aren't invested in Dolly Barton, Shawn was saying that soon here shareholders are going to vote on the potential of this new acquisition of this new property. But give us just a snapshot as we're coming into 2022. What are the goals? Myself personally, I put together all my goals, my personal goals, my health goals, my finance goals, my investment goals. I wrote out all my goals day before yesterday for 2022, put them on paper, got them hanging up. What are the goals for Dolly Barton? I know you're a goal-oriented person.
So the first thing is we've got a couple of housekeeping items that we've got to get done before we mail out our circular for the special meeting that we're going to have in the middle of February. So, go to the special meeting February 15th, have the transaction voted on. Once the transaction's done, Dolly Barton's transformed. We are now a company that's gone from 44 million ounces of silver to 137 million ounces of silver equivalent. That totally changes the game. So essentially what we'd have done there is we've consolidated a 15-kilometer trend. So we've got a 15-kilometer trend. We've got 4 deposits on our side of the trend. We've just acquired 3 deposits on the north end of the trend. And then it's going to be about the discovery potential in the 5.5 kilometers in between the 2 projects. So we've unified this Kitsault Valley trend. We've got a cluster of 4 projects on our side. They have a cluster of 3 on their side. We've unified it. We'll have 100% ownership, but it's not just about expanding and growing the mineral resources on each project. It's this 5.5 kilometers of exploration potential. And the reason that I'm looking at that 300 million ounce number now, when I came in, I said to people, listen, I want to get to 100 million ounces. And guys were saying, no, you're nuts. Like, this project's been around for 100 years. No one's ever grown it. How are you going to get to 100 million ounces? Well, I did it, and we exceeded that. Once we vote on this transaction, we'll have exceeded my original goal that I set out in June of 2021, and we'll exceed it by about 37%. My next goal is I'm going to be looking up, and again, look, I want to shoot for the moon, right? I want to shoot for the moon. Maybe we don't get to 300. Maybe it's only 250 or 200, but it's a big jump from where we started. And the reason I picked 300 is, Jake, it's all about M&A. It's all about having a big company come in and develop this project. We'll do it ourselves, but I think it's going to be much more creative if somebody else does it. Now, my point here on the 300 million number is, once you get to 300 million ounces of silver, it's not just the precious metals companies that you're attracting. You're now attracting the biggest miners in the world. And the biggest miners in the world, they're not precious metals miners. They're mining, the base metals. They're mining, iron ore. And if I get this company to 300 million, it's just that much more competition. So some of our goals next year is we're going to have big infill programs, expansion programs where the known resources are. And then it'll be about infilling the 5.5 kilometers in between. So ultimately, where I want to be is by 2023, new resource estimates, a PEA. So there's a PEA, preliminary economic assessment, that's on this new asset that we acquired, Homestake Ridge. And it's a very, very bullish PEA, and it only represents Homestake Ridge. But the new PEA that we'll have authored will be 1 mil for the 2 projects. And that's where the synergies come in here. And that's one of the big compelling reasons to do this acquisition here. It's because instead of having to build $200 million CapEx, projects, you just have to build 1. And yeah, so that's why this is so accretive for us as shareholders, and it's gonna lead to Dolly Barton going to a top 3 takeover candidate in BC's Golden Triangle, where we've seen about $5 billion worth of M&A.
So that's silver and the mining stock world. My final question is, so outside of silver in the mining stock world, what are the few success principles you think are important for all of us to crush 2022?
I just think, I don't know. For me, the one word that's going to be my word for 2022 is just strong. And it sounds like a simple word, but I just think that if I start every day being mentally strong, being physically strong, I'll be a good foundation for my kids, for my wife, for my business partners. And so, Jake, you've gotten to know me a little bit. So, every day, I train every day. I put healthy foods into my body. And really, it's just, I think the more people that we can help, there's a lot of value in that. I just had something really tragic happen to a friend of mine. And I told him, I said, look, I want to help you. I want to help you because it helps me, right? In so many ways. Like, it's very like the act of helping somebody for me is very selfish because it feeds me. And so, yeah, for me, it's, I want 2022 to be a year of strength. And it all starts with, waking up early, eating right, training hard, and working really hard.
So how do we be mentally strong? Physically maybe more self-explanatory. How do we be more mentally strong, right? Because what's happening right now in the world is I am somebody who believes that these are intentional forces, but even if you think it's all coincidental, there is an obvious place in history we're in where stress, chaos, and fear and drama is at an all-time high. And when our five senses are bombarded with it every day, like we have for going on now the third year, people start their mental and emotional strength starts to get squeezed out by life, right? And this happens as people get older. This happens due to trauma. Happens due to stress in life. So what are some keys to build the mental side of that mental side of that strength?
Well, Jay, I got a question for you, and I don't take this the wrong way, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but have you ever missed a meal in your life?
No.
Right.
And I mean, maybe I didn't eat one because I intentionally decided not to, but I have not missed a meal due to my life having no money. No.
Yeah. So, I think for everyone who's watching this channel, we are the 1 billion out of the 8 billion that I'm in the same boat. I've never missed a meal in my life. Right. And so I think we come from a place where we used to live in caves, and outside of those caves, there was a real risk. There was a predator that was, we were running for our lives, and there was real risk. So our brains are still wired in that way. So we make up stuff today. We make up stuff that's not real. And I think once we gain power over our minds and we ask ourselves, like there isn't anything in the world that we can't get through. And there's no correlation between stuff and happiness or security and happiness. Really, there isn't, right? Because we can be happy. It's all a state of mind. So listen, I haven't mastered this. I'm learning every day, but I just think that, no matter what happens, like if you have a mentality where even if something bad happens, like I had this one year, Jake, 2018, my father passed away. I had a 125-foot tree fall in my house, and I broke up with a business partner for 15 years, and it all happened within a week. And I remember it was like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, but there's a scene, Lieutenant Dane's like, challenging God. He's like, bring it down on me. And I was feeling like Lieutenant Dane in December 2018. And I'll tell you, man, like my lessons in life, when bad stuff happens now, I'm like, oh, I'm going to use this. Like there is no bad. It's just all perception. So I don't know. For me, it's no matter what cards I get dealt, I'm just going to play them the best I can. And I don't care what the outcome is. And if I can enjoy the journey along the way, and how do you do that? I don't know. For some people, it's writing down a gratitude list. What are you grateful for? Try that every night. Before you have dinner, go around the table and say, hey, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? Right. And I just think that we're all, racing around like a bunch of crazy people. If these lockdowns, if all this stuff has taught us anything, it's that we can live differently. We're human beings are amazing. And so anyways, yeah, those are, a gratitude list. If there's one thing, one takeaway is gratitude list, and just try to be in the moment.
Beautiful. I love that. Great way to end. Hey, for everyone listening, be sure to check out Dolly Barton Silver. We'll link their website in the description right there down below. That's Dolly Barton Silver. I want to thank Shawn Kuhn for coming on today. We'll link their Twitters in the description in addition to the website. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification, get notified for new videos. If you want to make sure you keep seeing all the stuff we're putting out on the channel, you think we're doing a good job, one of the ways to support it is make sure you hit the like button and bell notification. Even if you're subscribed, you do not get notified without the good old-fashioned bell notification. Give us a comment right there down below with your silver price predictions for 2022, or comment down below, go silver, go. And Shawn, I want to thank you for coming on today.